I'm Anthony Levatino. I am an obstetrician gynecologist. I currently practice in Las Cruces, New Mexico. I was an abortionist in the early 80s. I trained at the Albany Medical Center in the late 70s and then went into private practice in 1980. And over the next 4.5 years, I performed 1,200 first and second trimester abortions. Just a brief rehash of how the transition occurred. When I was still a resident learning obstetrics and gynecology and also learning to do abortions at the time, I met and married my wife, and we attempted to have a family of our own, but we're having no luck at that. We had an infertility problem, and it was pretty serious and difficult to overcome. When it looked like that wasn't going to succeed, we tried to adopt a child. And this was the late 70s, but it's no different than today. Anybody who tries to adopt a child finds out very quickly how difficult that is. When we met, when I went into my residency program, if you asked me how I felt about the abortion issue, I wouldn't have hesitated for a minute to tell you that I was pro-choice. This was a choice between a woman, her doctor, and nobody, in particular the baby's father, had anything to say about it. You know, a lot of people say they're pro-life or pro-choice, but if you're an obstetrician gynecologist and you say you're pro-choice, now it becomes something rather more personal. Are you going to actually do the procedures? And so right along with learning how to do deliveries and hysterectomies and everything else that obstetrician gynecologists do, I learned to do abortions. We did first trimester suction D&C abortions and second trimester saline abortions because that was the technology at the time. When I met my wife, she was pro-life. And obviously we clashed on this fairly early in our relationship. But we made a very fundamental mistake that carried on for years, and that was we chose to deal with this the way a lot of couples choose to deal with very difficult subjects. And that is, we didn't really talk about it. In the process of trying to find a baby for adoption, of course, again, anyone who's gone through that knows how difficult that is. And we're calling religious agencies and county agencies and state agencies and anyone else you can think of. And at the same time, I'm doing abortions as a regular part of my training at the Albany Medical Center. It was that time that I had maybe the first doubts about abortion. They were totally selfish. I mean, here I am trying to find a baby and I'm grinding them up in suction machines. But that was the first cracks in that wall as far as I was concerned. Eventually we were very fortunate in being able to adopt a little girl that we named Heather. And as sometimes happens, statistically they say it doesn't really make any difference, but we all hear the stories. Once we had a baby of our own, my wife got pregnant a month later. And we had 2 children just 10 months apart. They grew up together, they were very close together. When Heather, our adopted daughter, was just 2 months shy of her 6th birthday, she was killed in an auto accident. And having lost a child, that really changed my outlook on abortion tremendously. See, at that point, for several years before that, I was doing second trimester D&E abortions. I did over 100 of them, and they're pretty gruesome. They're very gruesome. But you can get used to anything when you're committed to the cause. And I did. But after losing Heather, doing a second trimester D&E abortion was just too darn difficult, and I stopped. And as I tell people, when you're doing an abortion, when you finally figure out in here, not just here, that killing a baby this big for money is wrong, and it doesn't take you too awfully long to figure out, it doesn't matter if the baby's even this big, it's all the same. And in February of 1985, I stopped doing abortions. Not doing abortions was one thing. And if you really listen to what I said, I hurt. That's why I stopped doing abortions. Getting involved in the pro-life movement is quite something else. Several months, and I didn't advertise I wasn't doing abortions, I simply stopped. But months and months later, my wife told me that we'd been invited by somebody at our church to a pro-life potluck dinner, and I laughed because everybody in the abortion industry knows that anybody involved in pro-life is a kook. Well, I know this because the press tells me so. They would never lie to me. And I had an easy excuse. We were going somewhere else that night. But as it coincidentally happened, the pro-life potluck dinner was on the road to where we were going. We had to pass it to go where we were going. And as we were driving, I looked at her and I said, you know what, just for giggles, let's stop at the pro-life potluck dinner and stay there for maybe just 10 minutes. It might be interesting just to see what's going on. And we walked in the door, and honest to God, it's the truth. It looked like one of the scenes from a cheap movie, where some kids end up in a bar or someplace else where they obviously don't fit in. Well, the ex-abortionists walked into a pro-life potluck dinner and the place absolutely went dead quiet because these people knew who I was. And a lot of them didn't know I had stopped doing abortions. We ended up spending an hour and a half at the pro-life potluck dinner. Guess what? These people weren't kooks. They understood the medicine, they understood the law. They were giving of their time sacrificially and voluntarily to stop what they saw as the biggest human rights abuse of our time. And we were very impressed with this, and that's how we got involved in the pro-life movement. Well, one thing I'm really excited about is just the technology. Ultrasound has been such a, a guiding and important tool for us all. I mean, as an obstetrician gynecologist, ultrasound absolutely revolutionized the practice of obstetrics. When I was training in the late 70s, ultrasound was brand new. I mean, we're talking B-scan, grainy little images. But I was fortunate to train at a time when we were right on the edge of the new technology. Ultrasound was brand new. Laparoscopy was brand new. So many things were brand new at the time. And to diagnose a placenta previa, for instance, or some other dangerous condition of pregnancy was so difficult before, and now was so easy with ultrasound. And the pro-life movement has adopted this, and it's the smartest thing it can do. The young generation is very visual, is very high impact, it's every 30 seconds, sometimes it's hard to make an impression. And a lot of people, in my experience, they're just so dedicated pro-choice. I mean, this is so important, and we have to support women's rights, and et cetera, many of the arguments that they make. Even the most pro-choice person, when they see an ultrasound, suddenly things change. Quick story. I got a law degree in 1990. And for several years before I went to Las Cruces, New Mexico, I worked both simultaneously actually as a lawyer and a physician. A friend of mine said I'm intellectually constipated. He's probably right. And of course now I'm working now, understand this, I'm working in a New York, this is Troy, New York, or near Albany, New York, but I'm working in a New York law firm. So you can get a pretty good idea of where the political bent was on a lot of the practitioners. We got along famously. We did very, very well. And I enjoyed my time there, and it was really exciting. I was doing a lot of medical malpractice defense work. That's what the law firm did. These were dedicated, then they were liberals, now they would be progressives, but attorneys. And one of them was a woman who became pregnant, very dedicated pro-choice woman who became pregnant. And, a wanted pregnancy, something she had waited years for, and she was thrilled about it. And she was about 16 weeks pregnant, and she'd gone for her first ultrasound. She just came back that morning, and we were all going out to lunch together. And we're walking down the streets of Troy, New York, and she said, "You know what, you know that I don't agree with you with all this pro-life stuff. But I got to tell you, after seeing my own baby on the screen, I'm not so sure." That's the power of ultrasound. The most encouraging word I can have for pregnancy help centers is "you're winning." And if you don't think so, just look at all the attacks that are coming from Planned Parenthood and other pro-choice, pro-abortion, organizations out there, accusing pregnancy help centers of being fake clinics, warning women not to come in and get ultrasounds, and all of this. I mean, we've gotten their attention, and we've gotten their attention because it is so effective. There is nothing in the entire pro-life movement. The pro-life movement has so many aspects to it. Physicians involved, people who picket abortion clinics, people who raise money for all kinds of causes, adoption agencies. You can go all places. But nowhere does the pro-life movement shine more than the pregnancy help movement. None. And they tell you all out there, you're winning, just keep doing what you're doing. The pro-life public, same thing. You're winning. You're not going to hear it on CNN. You're not going to hear it on NBC. You might hear it on Fox. Well, even there, I mean, most of the news organizations, they have a different mission, than you have in terms of what goes on with the pro-life movement. But stay informed and plug in with your local pregnancy help center. Yes, you can do a lot of good with the local pro-life groups, and do that. And you can do so much getting into schools and talking to kids and letting them understand what this is all about. But you're winning, just keep doing what you're doing. And as I said, stay in a group and get involved. As I said, your pregnancy help center is probably the focus of pro-life effort in your community, and that's where you should go.